If you're over 60 and you keep waking up in the middle of the night, wide awake at 1 or 2 in the morning, staring at the ceiling while the rest of the house is quiet and still, I want you to know something right away. This isn't just you, and it's not something you have to accept as a permanent part of getting older. Tonight, I'm going to show you a simple drink you can have before bed that many people have found genuinely helpful for staying asleep through the night. And I'm going to explain exactly why it works, how to use it properly, and the small mistakes that keep it from working for some people. Does this sound familiar? You go to bed feeling tired, you fall asleep just fine, and then somewhere in the early hours of the morning, your eyes pop open. Your mind clicks on. And instead of drifting right back to sleep the way you used to in your 30s or 40s, you find yourself lying there for 20 minutes, 40 minutes, sometimes an hour, watching the clock and feeling more awake by the minute. That specific pattern, waking up and then struggling to fall back asleep, is one of the most common sleep complaints among people over 60 in this country. And there's a very specific reason it happens. I'm Dr. Robert Vance, and after years of working with older adults on exactly this kind of sleep struggle, I've learned that this problem isn't a sign that something is broken. It's a natural shift in how your body handles sleep as you get older. And once you understand that shift, a simple bedtime habit can make a real, noticeable difference. So stick with me for the next few minutes, because by the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly why this keeps happening to you and exactly what to do about it tonight. Here's the part most people never hear explained clearly. As you get older, your body naturally produces less melatonin, the hormone that helps regulate your sleep-wake cycle. At the same time, sleep itself becomes lighter with age. You spend less time in deep, restorative sleep and more time in the lighter stages, which means the smallest disturbance, a passing car outside, a shift in temperature, even just your body's natural transition between sleep cycles can be enough to pull you fully awake instead of letting you sleep right through it the way your body used to. Your sleep hasn't failed you. It has simply changed, the same way so many other things about your body change over time. Have you noticed this happening around the same time almost every night? Many people over 60 report waking up almost like clockwork, and that consistency usually lines up with the natural dip in melatonin production that happens in the second half of the night, right when your body's early evening supply starts running low. This is exactly where tonight's drink comes in, not as a sedative, not as something that forces you unconscious, but as a gentle way to support the very hormone your body is already running short on. I want to slow down for a moment here, because understanding this timing is actually the key to everything else we're going to talk about tonight. Your body typically releases its natural melatonin in the early part of the night, helping you fall asleep and stay in that first deep stretch of rest. But by the time you reach those middle hours of the night, somewhere between 1 and 4 in the morning for most people, that initial supply has often already been used up. In a younger body, there's usually enough of a reserve and enough depth to your sleep cycles that you simply transition through these hours without ever fully waking. But as melatonin production naturally declines with age, that reserve gets thinner and your sleep, already lighter than it used to be, has less of a buffer to absorb the small disturbances that happen every single night for every single person at every age. This is precisely why so many people over 60 describe the exact same experience. Falling asleep isn't usually the problem. It's staying asleep once that early melatonin supply starts to fade. And once you understand that timing, it starts to make a lot more sense why a drink taken specifically before bed, one that gently supports melatonin production, can have such a meaningful effect on that particular stretch of the night when your body needs it most. So let's talk about the drink itself, because I know that's exactly why you clicked on this video. The one I recommend most often for this specific problem, waking up and struggling to fall back asleep, is warm tart cherry juice, diluted with a little water, taken about 30 to 60 minutes before bed. I know that might sound almost too simple, especially with so many complicated sleep products marketed to people your age. But tart cherry juice has actually been studied specifically for its effect on sleep, and the reason behind it is worth understanding. Tart cherries are one of the very few natural food sources that contain measurable amounts of melatonin itself. Some research has found that drinking tart cherry juice regularly is associated with modest improvements in sleep duration and sleep quality, particularly in older adults, likely because it gives your body a small, natural supply of the exact hormone it's already producing less of, rather than overriding your system with something artificial or forcing sedation the way some sleep aids do. But here's the part that surprises most people, and it's the reason this simple drink tends to work better than people expect it to. Tart cherries also contain natural compounds that may support your body's production of serotonin, which your body partially converts into melatonin overnight as part of your natural sleep cycle. So instead of just adding melatonin directly, the way a supplement pill might, tart cherry juice appears to gently support your body's own sleep chemistry from more than one angle, working with your biology instead of fighting against it. There's also a difference worth understanding between how a melatonin supplement works and how a food source like tart cherry juice works. A supplement typically delivers a fixed, often fairly high dose all at once, which some people tolerate well and others find leaves them feeling groggy the next morning, almost like the dose overshot what their body actually needed. A food source, on the other hand, tends to provide a smaller, more modest amount, closer to what your body would naturally produce on its own before age started slowing that production down. For many people, especially those who've tried a melatonin supplement and felt foggy or off the next day, this gentler, food-based approach tends to sit much better, precisely because it's working with your body's own natural levels instead of significantly exceeding them. Does this distinction sound like something that might explain a past experience of yours? If you've ever tried a melatonin supplement and felt strange or groggy the next morning, that grogginess is a very common reason people give up on melatonin altogether, without ever realizing that a gentler, food-based source might have given them the support they needed without that same next day fog. This information is for educational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional medical advice. Tart cherry juice is generally well tolerated by most people, but if you're taking blood thinners, managing diabetes, or you're simply unsure how a new drink might interact with something you're already taking, it's absolutely worth a quick conversation with your doctor or pharmacist first, especially if you have an existing health condition. This isn't meant to replace any treatment you're already receiving. It's meant to be a gentle addition that may help support the sleep you're already trying to protect. Now let's talk about how to actually use this drink properly, because this is where a lot of people accidentally undermine their own results without realizing it. Warm about 4 ounces of tart cherry juice, and if the tartness feels too strong on its own, dilute it with a little water to taste. Sip it slowly about 30 to 60 minutes before you plan to go to sleep. Not right as you're climbing into bed, but early enough that your body has a little time to begin winding down around it. Some people like to pair this with a few quiet, screen-free minutes, sitting calmly or reading a few pages of a book, which helps signal to your body that the day is closing, working alongside the drink rather than against it. A few practical notes that tend to make a real difference. Look specifically for tart cherry juice, sometimes labeled Montmorency cherry juice, rather than sweet cherry juice or a generic cherry-flavored drink, since the tart variety is the one most closely associated with the sleep-related research. Many people also find it easier to tolerate and easier to stick with consistently when they choose a version without a lot of added sugar, since a large sugar spike right before bed can sometimes work against the very calm, settled feeling you're trying to create for yourself in the evening. If the full-strength juice feels too intense on your stomach, diluting it further, even down to about half juice and half warm water, still allows you to get the benefit without any discomfort. Consistency matters more than the exact amount. It's better to have a smaller, comfortable serving every single night than to have a large serving occasionally and skip it most nights. Your body responds to patterns, not one-time efforts, and this drink works best as a steady part of your evening rhythm rather than something you reach for only on your worst nights. But there is one important thing most people overlook, and it might be the biggest reason this simple habit doesn't work as well for some people as it does for others. It's not just about what you drink before bed, it's about what you're still drinking earlier in the day. Many people over 60 don't realize how sensitive their bodies have become to caffeine as they've aged. Your liver metabolizes caffeine more slowly than it used to, which means that afternoon cup of coffee or iced tea that never used to bother you might still be affecting your nervous system well into the evening, quietly working against the very melatonin support you're trying to give your body with tonight's drink. This is one of the most common mistakes I see. Someone falls asleep just fine at bedtime, so they assume caffeine isn't a factor, without realizing caffeine's biggest impact on older adults often isn't on falling asleep, it's on staying asleep once you're there. How many nights have you gone to bed feeling perfectly tired, only to still find yourself wide awake a few hours later, without ever connecting it back to that afternoon coffee or the iced tea you had with lunch? If tart cherry juice is going to work the way it's meant to, giving it the best possible chance means cutting off caffeine by early afternoon, so your body isn't fighting two conflicting signals at once. It's worth remembering that caffeine doesn't only come from coffee. Many people over 60 don't think twice about an afternoon cup of black or green tea, a can of soda, or even a small piece of dark chocolate after dinner, not realizing that each of these carries enough caffeine to quietly linger in the system for hours. This isn't about cutting these things out of your life completely. It's specifically about being mindful of the timing, since the same cup of tea that feels perfectly relaxing at 10 in the morning can behave very differently in your body if it's consumed at 4 or 5 in the afternoon, right when your body should be beginning to prepare for the wind down toward evening. The second mistake worth mentioning is timing the drink too close to actually falling asleep. Or worse, having it too late in the evening after a full glass of water or two, which can lead to a different kind of middle of the night waking entirely, simply from needing the bathroom. That's why the 30 to 60-minute window before bed tends to work best, giving your body enough time to begin absorbing the melatonin-supporting compounds without adding an unrelated interruption to your night. The third mistake is expecting an immediate, dramatic change on the very first night. This drink works by gently supporting your body's natural chemistry, not by knocking you unconscious the way a sedative might. Most people who find it genuinely helpful notice the difference building gradually over 1 to 2 weeks of consistent use, not as a one-time miracle fix. Let me tell you about a patient of mine, a man named Harold, 69 years old, who came to see me after months of waking up almost every single night around 1 in the morning and lying awake for over an hour before falling back asleep. Harold had already tried several things on his own. He tried going to bed earlier. He tried a sleep app on his phone. He even tried an over-the-counter sleep aid a friend recommended, which left him groggy well into the following afternoon, which was its own kind of miserable. When we sat down and talked through his evening habits, it turned out he was still having a small decaf coffee most evenings, not realizing decaf still contains a meaningful amount of caffeine, and he was going to bed almost immediately after finishing it. We made 2 simple changes. He replaced that evening decaf with a small, warm glass of tart cherry juice, diluted with a little water, about 45 minutes before bed, and he stopped having any coffee at all, decaf included, after 2 in the afternoon. The first few nights, Harold told me, honestly, nothing felt very different. He still woke up around 1 in the morning, still felt that familiar restlessness settle in, and he almost gave up on the whole idea, assuming it simply wasn't going to work for him the way it seemed to work for other people. But he stuck with it, mostly because I'd encouraged him to give it a full 2 weeks before drawing any conclusions, since this kind of gentle, natural support tends to build gradually rather than working like a switch. By the end of that second week, something had shifted. Harold told me he was still waking up occasionally in the night, which is completely normal at his age and nothing to be alarmed by. But instead of lying awake for an hour feeling frustrated and watching the clock, he was falling back asleep within 10 or 15 minutes, and he woke up in the morning feeling noticeably more rested than he had in months. He described it to me almost like his body had finally remembered how to fall back asleep on its own, something it used to do automatically decades earlier without him ever having to think about it. What changed for Harold wasn't some dramatic new treatment or an expensive product. It was removing a hidden obstacle, that lingering afternoon and evening caffeine, and gently supporting what his body was already trying to do on its own the whole time. Share Harold's story because I think it's important for you to hear that this really can be that simple. You don't need an elaborate routine or a cabinet full of products to start feeling the difference. You need one focused change, done consistently, and enough patience to let your body respond to it over a couple of weeks rather than expecting results after a single night. Let's bring everything together, because I don't want to leave you with a long list to remember. Here's exactly what to do tonight. Cut off caffeine, including coffee, tea, and even chocolate, by early afternoon, giving your body enough time to fully clear it before bedtime. About 30 to 60 minutes before you plan to sleep, warm roughly 4 ounces of tart cherry juice, diluted with water if the tartness feels too strong, and sip it slowly while you spend a few quiet, screen-free minutes winding down. Give it time, at least 1 to 2 weeks of consistent use, before deciding whether it's making a difference for you, because this drink is designed to gently support your body's natural rhythm, not override it overnight. I want you to remember something important as you try this tonight. You're not broken, and your sleep hasn't failed you. Your body has simply changed the way every body changes over time. And once you understand that change, instead of quietly fighting against it every single night, you can actually work with your body to get closer to the kind of rest you deserve, rather than lying awake, feeling frustrated by something you never fully understood in the first place. It's also worth being realistic and patient with yourself through this process. Some nights, even with the caffeine cutoff and the tart cherry juice done exactly right, you may still wake up briefly in the middle of the night. That's not a sign that something has failed. Occasional waking is simply a normal part of how sleep works at every age, including for people decades younger than you. What you're working toward isn't a night with zero waking whatsoever. You're working toward those wake-ups becoming shorter, less frequent, and far less frustrating. So that instead of lying there for an hour feeling wide awake and anxious, you drift back off within a few quiet minutes, barely remembering it happened at all by the time morning comes. I also want to gently remind you that this single change, as helpful as it can be, works best as part of an overall evening rhythm that respects how your body has changed with age. Going to bed and waking up at roughly consistent times, even on weekends, giving yourself those quiet, screen-free minutes before sleep, and being mindful of caffeine timing all work together with tonight's drink rather than in place of it. None of this needs to feel complicated or overwhelming. It simply asks for a small amount of consistency, night after night, and a little patience while your body relearns a rhythm it's had all along, just one that's shifted slightly with time. One last thing before we wrap up tonight. If you've struggled with this for a long time, months or even years, I know it can start to feel like nothing is ever going to help, and that frustration is completely understandable. But sleep, especially at this stage of life, tends to respond well to small, consistent, gentle changes far more than it responds to drastic overhauls or expensive solutions. Tonight's drink is a perfect example of that. It's inexpensive, it's simple, and it asks very little of you beyond a small amount of consistency and a little patience while your body adjusts. Before you go, I'd genuinely love to hear from you in the comments below. What time does your body tend to wake you up most often? Right around 1 or 2 in the morning, or closer to dawn? And if you decide to try the tart cherry juice tonight, come back in a week or two and let me know how it went, because your experience might be exactly what helps someone else reading through these comments recognize their own pattern for the very first time. If tonight's video gave you something helpful to try, consider subscribing, because I'll keep sharing honest, research-informed conversations like this one, specifically for people who want to feel rested, clear-headed, and truly like themselves again at every stage of life. There's no pressure here, just an open door to keep learning together, one small, manageable change at a time. And if this helped you tonight, you might also want to check out the video I made about the 5 supplements that can quietly work against you after 60, because understanding what's going into your body during the day connects directly to how well you sleep at night, and I think you'll find it just as eye-opening. Sleep well tonight, be patient with your body as it finds its rhythm again, and I'll see you in the next one.